Welcome to this part of your introductory web development course. HTML is the topic of today. The main purpose of HTML is to organize data. It doesn't care about how anything looks. In the next session, we will be learning about CSS for that. HTML is the skeleton that holds everything together. Just like a building is only as strong as its foundation. In a more web-based setting, HTML ensures that the page is functional across a range of devices and browsers, and offers a structure for incorporating CSS, JavaScript, and the website or application's actual content. Now, what are we going to do in this session? We will learn about HTML and the basic HTML syntax. We will look at the various HTML elements that we will use in this course, and we will create the basic structure for our own website. So let's get into it. There are different opinions about HTML being a language or not, but in this course, we will assume it is a language. We already know that HTML is a language type that organizes content. In other words, it tags various elements like text and graphics to instruct your browser on how and in what sequence to display the content. Displaying the content is a major factor in HTML. While working with various HTML elements and writing some HTML in the previous video, we didn't fully comprehend them. We examined the components of HTML or HTML elements and used them to add specifics to our portfolio website. Now let's look at the element tags. A few element tags are already familiar to us. An HTML element can be thought of as a distinct component of a web page, such as a text block, an image, or a header. The header element h1 that you utilized in the previous lesson was as follows. Every HTML element has an opening tag, and a tag such as h1 is enclosed by angled brackets. The definition of elements and instructions on how to display them are provided by tags. For instance, tags can inform a browser whether an element is an image or a paragraph or text. The majority of HTML elements contain an opening tag and a closing tag that indicate their beginning and ending point. The element name is preceded by a / in the closing tag, which is simply the opening tag, which encloses the opening tag. The following is a broad description of an HTML element format. When we want to add something on a web page, the element name must be one of the preset tags. This could be anything ranging from h1, h3, p, or strong. It can be anything like hello world in our h1 example. Before using HTML elements, let's look at a few crucial things to understand about them. Now let's look at different attributes. Some properties that HTML components can have change how they function and behave. The opening tag contains a list of these properties. For instance, in this HTML code, as you would predict, the image will be 300 pixels wide and 200 pixels tall, because our image element has attributes with values of width and height of 300 and 200 respectively. Let's consider another illustration. The element with the suitable name text area will show a text input field where our users can type text. In this illustration, the properties, rows, and columns specify how many rows and columns the text area should include accordingly. Directly within HTML attributes like width and height for images or rows and columns for text area. Directly within HTML, attributes like width and height for images or rows and columns for text area are helpful. However, some characteristics have a specific significance, which means that they can only be used in conjunction with other CSS or JavaScript to connect the three pillars. We will learn more about these attributes later in this course. It should be noted that some components don't contain any content. Therefore, a closing tag is not required for them. For instance, images simply require the src element, which stands for source and specifies where to retrieve the image. Take note of the closing tag at the end instead of img at the end. This is due to the fact that image elements contain a source attribute, src, that retrieves displayed images. There isn't any information inside that is necessary. Similar to img, there are other components that can be used without a closing tag. Now let's look at nesting elements. HTML elements are capable of nesting or holding additional components inside of themselves. Look at this block of code. Take note of the two powerful elements we have in our paragraph element. That's absolutely normal. No matter how much white space or new lines you use, HTML doesn't care. The two instances above will display exactly the same way. However, we prefer the latter because it is easier to read. Now let's look at other configurations. A few fundamental guidelines in addition to these are common to all HTML pages. For instance, HTML itself must be the outermost HTML element. Similar to this, all material that is visible goes into the body tag, and all configuration and metadata or information about the page itself goes into the head tag. Let us recall our web page. Because of this, the browser recognized title tag in the head tag and presented it as the web page title, even though it wasn't accessible inside the page. Let us now consider HTML elements. Let's take a closer look at some of the elements that we'll be using in this course, now that we have a basic understanding of HTML elements. Headings. The headings are precisely what they sound like. There are 6 headers in HTML, numbered from H1 to H6. The largest and most essential heading on the page is H1. It denotes the importance of the material that follows. As we near H6, the relevance rapidly declines. For example, this is a heading. Now let's look at anchor links. HTML's hypertext feature is enabled by the anchor element, or A. It may point to another page on the same website or another website. To create an anchor link to Google's homepage, follow these steps. The following code will appear on screen. Take note of how the anchor href value appears in the bottom left corner of the page when the mouse pointer is hovered over the link. To get to this particular page, you must have clicked a few of these anchor links. Paragraphs. These blocks are represented by the paragraph element, P. Typically, we structure paragraphs so that there is a nice gap between each one and the first paragraph's heading. Lists. When displaying data as an ordered or unordered list, lists are highly helpful. We utilize the OL tag for ordered lists, a list with numbers, and the UL tag for unordered lists, a list with bullet points. Each list item within one of these elements is identified by the tag li. Here's an illustration. Here is how our example renders, which is just a fancy phrase for how it appears when we refresh the page in our browser. Moving on, let's consider divisions and spans. Imagine a web page as a set of boxes that hold everything on it. As a web developer, it's your responsibility to arrange these boxes such that the entire website appears attractive on all screens. Text, photos, and other elements that we view on a website are included in these boxes. These boxes are referred to as spans and divisions, respectively. Divs and spans don't function on their own, but when we add elements to them, like as text and photos, they allow us to position the text and images anywhere we wish. Bags make an excellent comparison for divs and spans. Backpacks and handbags are not particularly handy on their own. Nobody would walk around and with an empty bag. When we store items in them, they become useful because they aid in maintaining order. We like to think about divisions and spans in that way. They serve as containers for the website's real functioning features.